Good evening, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. My name is Suzanne Hart, and our topic today is why do the words racism, power, and privilege make people crazy? You ever notice that when those words are mentioned, people have all sorts of emotions, right? And I think it's because when those words are made, people feel like there is a victim and there's an accuser, and we run to our perspective corners. But the question is why? So today we're going to be talking a little bit about racism. So this is for you if you are a leader and you have a desire to really tackle this conversation in a real way and you want to kind of deconstruct it. This is for you if you're someone who wants to make a difference in your community, in your family, amongst your friends. This is for you if you're open to disruptive change-making conversations, right? So as you join us, hello, Yetta, welcome, welcome. As you join us, please let us know who you are, where you're joining us from, and what you do. Who are you called to serve? Put that in the comment section so we know a little bit about you. Also going to ask you to, as you jump on, this is a beautifully powerful conversation, important conversation.
Yes.
So definitely bless a life. Share it to your page, share it to a friend's page, share it to the page of a leader who you think are up to big things and are ready to make transformation in the world. If you are here after the fact and you're watching the replay, first hashtag replay to let us know you're here. And then also, please do let us know your name, where you're joining us from, and who you are called to serve. What do you do while you're living? Now, why do we ask you to do that? Because although we're virtual, it is a networking opportunity. You never know who might be scrolling through the comments section, see your beautiful information and say, I need to check this person out because I might need what they are doing. I might need their product or their service. Also, when you love what you hear, and you will, bless a life. Share it, tag someone, tell them they gotta listen, because my guest tonight is special. I just gotta say, she's special. All right, so let's see, I see hello. And if you're joining, and you're, of course, we're on StreamYard, give StreamYard permission to let us know who you are so that your name can actually show up so we can know what platform. I see someone from Facebook that is out there, but we don't know who you are. And I'd love to be able to call you by name. And finally, what I'm gonna ask you to do is also comment, ask questions, get into the conversation, because I'm gonna be talking with my guests, but we're also gonna be looking to see what you have to say about the topic. All right, so let's get this started. As I said, my name is Suzanne Hart. Welcome to Unstoppable Mindset, and our topic tonight is why do the words racism, power, and privilege seem to make people a little crazy, right? Now let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed that when we come to these three words, people get uncomfortable, they get defensive, they get a little squirrely, and it seems to bring up a lot of emotions: shame, blame, guilt, judgment, all these different things. So what we're going to be talking about a little bit tonight, or maybe a lot, we'll see where we go, is why. Why? As I said, this conversation is for you if you're a leader that's up to making changes, whether it be changes in your family, changes in your community, changes in your business. This is a conversation for you. So let me introduce my very, very special guest. I met this woman at a mastermind all the way across the world in Dubai. It seems like you gotta go to different, like way across the globe to meet spectacular people. And I got to sit beside her. And I gotta tell you, you know when someone just has that internal power, that sense of purpose? This is what I felt. So let me tell you a little bit about her. She's a best-selling author, High Heel Leadership. Yes, she is. So and we did talk about her book on one of these lives. She's award-winning public administrator, an award-winning public administrator. She has been an acting city manager, an assistant city manager, chief marketing officer, and a director of HR. Now, this is so cool because we're going to be talking about oppression, power, privilege. And these are paramount when you're in these types of roles, because these roles have influence, right? She has been voted, or Florida's 50 most powerful and influential leaders and top 25 most influential women in the state of Florida. Now, she's a proud mother of 3. And I think what I love about this particular woman is her passion for service and change. Her commitment to make a difference, not only in the lives of the people she knows, but in the lives of the greater community. That's you and me, right? And I think we'll be seeing and hearing a lot more from this beautiful woman. So please help me welcome Natasha Hampton.
Hi, Suzanne. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
I am, every time I sit down with you, I get like, we're going to have a juicy, good conversation.
We usually do.
Right? I'm like, hold on to your seats because we are going places. I love it. And I love it because you challenge me in how you think. And I love it when people just stretch the conversation outside of what's comfortable and into new places that I truly believe that we need to go.
Yeah.
So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And likewise, I really enjoy having thought leadership discussions with you. And you're amazing. So the feeling is absolutely mutual. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you. And so welcome. And I see we got some powerhouses in the house. I see Taria's here. I see Yetta Decker's here. And Yetta and Taria were in the conversation last week as we kicked off Black History Month. And our question that we were asking is, knowing a group's history, is 1 month of Black history enough, or is it just something that we do to make us feel good? And I know, and we went places. And it was interesting because for me, I love Black History Month on a personal level and as a member of the Black community, but I don't think it's enough when we're talking about the broader conversation. And why is because of the conversation we're going to have tonight, right? Learning a history and understanding a history does not really dive into racism, power, privilege, oppression, biases, all these different things. So I thought, who can I have this conversation with? And of course, we were on the phone and I said, I found her. We're going to have this conversation. So I want to jump in and I want to first talk about racism in and of itself. And as we have this conversation, I'm going to ask everybody to not go to your defensive corners from a place of accusation and all the things that we do when we hear these words. Because really what I want to do is I want to look at it and I want to break it down. Because I firmly believe, and Natasha, before I even go into it, tell me if this makes sense to you. I firmly believe that we know racism when we feel it, when we see it, when we experience it, when we see it happening to someone else. But I don't think we actually understand what gives it teeth, what it really is, like what gives it the power that it has. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. It absolutely does.
Okay, awesome. That's what we're going to do. We're going to attempt to do tonight. So, I'm reading because it's Black History Month, and I read books based on themes. So I'm right into I'm rereading one of my favorite books, Black Theology, Black Power. It's a great read, and it had impacted me. It impacted me when I was 29, and I wanted to read it again. So racism, they say, is the assumption that one race in it is inherently superior over another. But the other key part is that it also infers the right of one race to dominate another race. Right. And I love that there's 2 words that are so key in this definition: assumption and inference. And I really want to underline that assumption and inference don't mean facts. It is an assumption. But how often Natasha, have we related to an assumption as a fact?
Most often, too often, right? And I think that's where we get the term fake news and those kinds of things. But certainly assumptions have become reality for some.
Mhm.
We talk about perception is reality. Well, assumption is most definitely reality for a lot of us.
So I really want to really just highlight for everyone in that definition is the word assumption and the inference, right? So that doesn't mean fact.
Right.
And I know there might be some people going, I don't know. It doesn't mean fact. It's an assumption, and it's an assumption based on skin color biology, and the inference that the other group isn't as intelligent, isn't as doesn't have the same abilities, don't have the capacity to learn the same skills, all those different things. Therefore, they must be dominated, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Now, what I really want to talk about, so that's the assumption. But what, so this is where I want to go. I have assumptions about many things. It doesn't give me the power to act on my assumptions. And so this is where I really want to look at, because my real question tonight is what gives racism, the assumption and the inference, the power that a whole group of people can act on it.
Yeah, there is so much power in words, and there's so much power in the interpretation of words. There's also power in the transference of word, interpretation of word, and when someone doesn't do their due diligence to understand it in its context. And so I think that's the power. The power is when you are, whether you're denied or you don't do it, you're on your own, to understand, to really have these kinds of dialogue. You leave that interpretation up to someone else to fuel you and and that's how you take that in. And I think that's where the power, the power is then that comes in and it's transferred, because you're not doing your due diligence to learn for yourself.
Mm-hmm. And I think when I first encountered racism, I come from Trinidad. We came here when I was 5. I didn't know what racism was. Not that there's not racism in Trinidad, it just doesn't show up the same way. So I didn't know what it was. And the thing that really struck me when I unpacked this, because I'm a noodler, anybody knows me, I may think way too much. But when we first moved here, we moved to a small white town. My sister and I were the only Black children in that town when we got there. And what was really interesting was that I played with all the kids with really no issue the first year or so that we got there. Kindergarten, no issue. Got into grade 1, and my teacher, and I really want you for this to sink in. My teacher, position and power, woman, person of authority, singled me out because of the color of the skin, my accent, my difference. And in that moment, everything changed. And so there was a transfer of teaching from one generation to another. And of course, no one stops to ask, is this an assumption? Is it fact? It was just a transfer. And suddenly I was treated differently. So I think what for me, when I think about it, what gives this power? It's not just the assumption. It is that it's an assumption that is in the fabric of the establishments.
Well, you said something interesting, because you said it was a transfer of teaching, but it was also a transfer of power, that you transferred your power based on the assumptions that she made.
Oh, that was good. I hope everybody got that. In other words, I lost my power, gave it away based on an assumption that she made,
Mhm.
right? And this is the interesting thing. Based on an assumption that she made, there's a loss of power, and suddenly you start to doubt, particularly when everyone else in the area is treating you like less than. You start to question and doubt. I was really blessed that I have a kick butt, take no prisoners type of mom, and she was like, "Oh yeah, we're not having this." When she started to figure it out. But there was definitely that moment of doubt, and even with the power of my mom, it's still some of it got in, right?
Mhm. Yeah, because when you particularly, and I think that that's particularly because you saw this person as a figure of authority,
Huh.
right? And so that's the danger of when we have authoritative figures in our minds, or whether we've been taught that that's an authoritative figure. And from there, that when their assumptions become your reality and you transfer your power because of an authoritative figure. So we have to be very careful with who we claim as authoritative figures.
Mm-hmm. And this is where I think we don't look at the impact of this thing called racism, is that children look to the past generation as authoritative
Yeah.
figures, and that past generation passes on the assumptions as truth,
Yes.
and then that assumption is adopted by young children, and they grow into it, and once we grow into it is conditioned.
Yeah.
And this is a crazy thing. It's conditioned from the perspective of those in power. So let's say it's conditioned through white people, it's conditioned even in Black people, so it's conditioned in everyone that lives, that this is what is, and it's now related to as real.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when with that condition, there's a transference of power on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the privilege of exerting that power usually is only left to uh, the person or persons or group that's making the assumptions.
Mm-hmm. That's it. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so the status quo, the power base that passes it on, it just gets passed on from generation to generation. And I think this is where we get the emotions, because here we are sitting today. We are we are in 2021, and I have we have friends that are I have friends that are all races. And as soon as when you get to begin to talk about racism, you can feel people go, but that's not me, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not me. And I think that's the challenging part of it. When I wrote one of my posts, or even one of these talks, I said that often the assumption is that racism is done by those people that are mean, not nice, evil people. And what I think we're all challenged to look at is that racism is in the fabric of the society, because it is in every it is the fabric that built every institution. It's
Mm-hmm.
the fabric that built every educational system. It's the fabric that conditions what's in our libraries and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the fabric of our news. It's in the fabric of it's in the fabric.
Yes.
So it's not that we can say I'm not affected by it. It is like saying, I live in North America and there's air, but I don't breathe it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The what you said is so key, and what we've done is we've given racism power and privilege a face.
Mm.
And that's why I don't think we can get to the real heart of it, because as you stated, it's in the fabric. It's woven into everything um, that drives everything that we do. And because we've given it a face, we haven't yet realized that it's beyond that. It's like almost in a DNA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to, Ken Decker, I'm watching, and he says it's not always what we say as parents, it's also what we model that gets. That's so powerful, so powerful. Thank you, Ken. Let's talk about the face, because I know when we were having our conversation a few weeks ago, and you dropped that, you said we give it a face, and I had to stop and go, yeah, we do, right? And we give it a face of someone who is a bully, someone who is mean, someone who's wielding power, someone who's out to get us. And I think what you're saying, and I'm being that direct, right? We give it the face of lynchings, we give it the face of mobs, we give it the face of beating up, we give it the face of gunshots, we give it the face. And when it's not that face, it's like a slippery slope.
Yes.
And that's why I think, my title was, why does it make people crazy? Because it's the craziness of the slippery slope, that if it's not that face, and it's a face that looks like a kind grade 1 teacher, if it's a face that looks like the nice woman next door, if it's a face that looks like your friend that you've known for years, which a lot of that happened this year, but it also, if it's a face that looks like me and you, it's kind of like, okay, wait a minute. And then this is what happens. We're like, is this it? Is this racism? Is that what I'm feeling? Is what's going on? And I think, and even after the perpetrators, they're like, I don't look like the person that you're talking about. I don't look like the face, therefore it cannot be.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me say, and I'm just going to put it out here. Let me be very clear that Black people can oppress Black people too. It can. It happens because power and privilege is not a race thing, but we've given it that. We've tied that together. We've tied power and privilege and racism together, and it's really not. It's because we all, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, have privilege and power. If I'm able-bodied, I'm more privileged than someone who's not.
Right.
Right. So I'm saying there's a re-engineering of thought that has to happen here for us to really get to the heart of why these words make you crazy.
Absolutely. And I want to define privilege so that we're all on the same page, right? And privilege is the ability to oppress, marginalize, exclude someone based on status or based on belonging to a group. Privilege is access, not based on earning, but based on just because I belong to a group. And so when oftentimes when we tell people they're privileged, they take offense. And I want to say to everyone listening, I have privileges that I know other people don't, right? And as you said, I'm an able-bodied woman, right? And I know that some men will have more privileges than I do, but I have more privilege than some women I know. Parents have privileges that their children don't have. Depending on what economic place you live, you may have more privilege and more access. So I think we, like you said, we look at these words and we automatically give them these negative meanings versus just sitting in the meaning and saying, what does privilege actually mean?
And because we've given it a face, and because it's within the fabric of everything that we do and everything that touches us, that's where the danger, that's where the defensiveness comes in, because I know that there is there are certain privileges afforded to some subsets, some groups of people, that those privileges aren't afforded to others. For example, I may not, my parents may not have been able to afford to send me to Harvard, where you have other parents that can afford to send their children to Harvard. That's privileged, right? But that's not necessarily power or racism, right? It's just a privilege. And so we go crazy because we often associate racism, power, and privilege as one.
Yes. Yes.
And because we associate it as one, and because we put a face to it, we put a face to the one, and racism, power, and privilege is like the creme de la creme, right? So if you just have privilege, but you don't have power, and you're not, there's no racism, then that's just kind of one of the three. But if you've got all three, because it's one, and you put a face to it, and the face doesn't look like yours, then now I feel like you've taken something from me, and it's on now.
Yeah, we coming out like this to defend.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so I want to touch on two things that you said, because for my brothers and sisters watching, Natasha did say, and I'm nodding in agreement, that Black people do have privilege and Black people can oppress, right? And I remember telling someone that and Black people can act in a racist manner, and my person said, "Heck no, we have no power to do so." And so I said to them, so this was my thing. So I asked them, I said, "Have you ever had a teacher that looked like you, but then told you for some reason, because of how you looked, could not get to the next level? Maybe you shouldn't apply to Harvard, or maybe you shouldn't apply to this place," right? And they're dealing on a base of a race assumption. Remember, we had the definition, a race assumption, right? That already tells you that you're less than. And the person stopped and they thought and they went, "Wow, I've never thought of this." And the reason I was highlighting it for us is because I want to talk, when we talk about assumptions, and you said giving your power away, but I wanted to also talk about the internalization of assumptions. Ooh. Right? And I think one of the biggest challenges, I was reading today, and they said one of the worst byproducts, the biggest catastrophe of racism and enslavement is the internalization of our less than, our self-hate, our disrespect of self, because it's everywhere. It's hard to get away from it. And so in those moments, we will oppress people that look like us, because what else are we taught to do? And so it really speaks to the level of work and awareness that is required in this conversation.
Yes, absolutely. If we are to move the needle in a direction that allows us to really have a re-engineering of thought and a collective thought, because let's be clear, you can't eradicate anything alone, and you can't eradicate anything in just one group of people. We know that, even from that, in our civil rights, that was a fight that not just Black people fought, white people fought that fight too. And so we have to really understand how our internalization of assumption even affects the way we talk about racism.
Absolutely.
The way we talk about power and privilege. To think that you don't have power, or that your power is somewhat subservient to the power of another race of people, that's a sickness in and of itself. And so we can't even begin to scratch the surface of having the meaningful conversations about how do we eradicate or change systems when we as a people have internalized words like racism, prejudice, and power a certain way.
And and this is so important what you're saying, and this is so key, because what you're really speaking to, Natasha, is the individual work. And you know, when I speak to when I have these conversations, I say that this thing called racism, right, has bamboozled everybody. Because imagine your perceived privilege and power is based on an assumption, and your perceived less than is based on an assumption. So none of us are dealing in facts, and therefore all of us are fighting to hold on to something that's not real.
Yeah.
And that's the crazy, and I think that's why we go kind of crazy, because we're fighting. People are fighting to hold on to privilege that is based on an assumption, and power that's based on an assumption.
Mm-hmm.
And people are fighting to get to a place that is power based on something that's not even real.
Right.
And isn't that it's nutso?
Yeah.
So for me, as I've done my work on this, what I've come to realize is the only person that can free me is me. Right? The only person that can free me is me, because the bondage is not here. The bondage is here. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've heard of the group Evoke. Evoke sung the song. They sang it best. Free your mind and the rest will follow.
Absolutely, girl. Absolutely.
So don't get me singing up in here, Suzanne. I will hit that note if I have to, just to get that point across.
We might have to close with that.
And the rest will follow.
We might have to close with that, but this is the thing. So free your mind and the rest will follow. But this is where I really got to, was that for me to be free, it's my work between my two ears, and it's my fight for my own personal power. And it's my standing for my right to be treated with all the humanity that anyone else is treated with. And I will say to every other person, black, white, whatever color you are, the work is yours, right? Because in order for the work to be done, it is to accept the bias, the judgment, the assumptions, and do the work that says, where do I go if these are just assumptions? Yeah. How do I now act? Because in the silence of not challenging the assumptions as individuals, we feed it.
Yes. Yes. You feed it, you buy into it, you play into it. And before we can get to the our work is the systemic racism that plagues, society as a whole. But before we can get there, we have to individually understand how we're playing a part
in that. It's so interesting, because last week, Natasha, just what you said, I think it might have been Ken who said, or it was one of the Deckers, you can't legislate the willingness and the wanting to understand another group.
Oh, yes.
Was that not good?
Oh, yes.
You can't legislate it. It has to be, and I think one of the words was, it has to be a compassionate curiosity that has you go, let me be curious about another group, and I'll take it another level. In order to be curious about another group, I also am required to say and know that as I am curious, I walk with conditioning that help me see them through a certain lens. Yes. I walk with biases that have been spooned into me from a young child. I walk with judgments that I can't help have because I live in a society. I walk with visceral reactions that must come up because that's how I'm conditioned. And it is when we begin to say, not from a place of that's not me, because that's what usually what happens. That's not me. I'm the nice person. I don't fit the face, as you said, using your language. What happens is people defend versus saying, let me reflect.
Yes, and that's the curse. That's the curse that makes us crazy. I'm working on my next book project. It's called Beauty and the Bias Beast, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
talk about the subconscious bias, and that we should all recognize and understand that it is our subconscious biases that drive our decision making. It drives everything that we do, and it's not a bad thing. Having a bias is not a bad thing. We just have to become aware of our biases and recognize them, and then do something different relative to decision making, and what's driving our decisions, and how it's driving our decisions, and how it's creating the interaction with other people. So it's not a bad thing to have bias, but what we must do the work of is becoming aware of those biases.
And I think the reality is you and I can't be human and not have a bias.
Absolutely.
A bias is a byproduct of experience. A
Yes.
bias is a byproduct of conditioning. A bias is a byproduct of living in someone's home.
Absolutely. And those biases are driving our decision making, whether we realize that or not. It's driving our decision making. It's driving what we think about privilege. It's driving what we think about racism. It's driving what we think about power. And until we become aware of those subconscious biases to re-engineer that thought, we won't move in the direction we need to move in.
You know, when I did child protection many moons ago, I was blessed to be included in a cultural competency, race relations, diversity training. The title was like about this long. And I remember walking into the room, and I might have shared this last week, but it's worth repeating. And so you can imagine me, a little militant, Black little thing. And I'm thinking I'm going to a cultural competency, race relations training. So I'm walking in, not really aware of my own biases at this point. And so I walk into the room. Now, my assumption, because it's a race relations training, is that the instructor is going to be Black. We're going to be in the Black power conversation. It's going to be on. I'm just going to drop it in the space. This is what I thought. I walk into the room, and there's this beautiful Asian woman. She walks with a cane, so she has a disability. And she lets us know that she lived for a number of years in a concentration camp, and some of her disabilities were as a result of escaping, right? And just like, if you could talk about oppressed, like everything you could think of, this woman has experienced. And she starts the training by saying, we all have been oppressed, and we all can be oppressors. Natasha, I was like, I must be in the wrong room, because I came from a cultural competency, race relations training. Yeah. Biggest blessing in my life, and it guides my leadership, it guides my engagement with people, it guides every conversation I have. I'll never forget that. And she said, in order to get to the core of this topic, we are all going to be required, no matter where you sit in this room, to examine our biases, to examine every stereotype you have been taught, your judgment. You're going to have to examine your privilege, the power you have, and when you don't feel power. She said you're going to have to be able to look at your ability to marginalize people and exclude. We're going to have to look at economics. We're going to have to look at difference. We're going to have to look at how we snap judgment, label, and identify people. It was like such a list, but what was beautiful about it was she was able to unpack it for me in such a way that I could walk out of that room and say that I do have the potential to oppress. Mm-hmm. I have been oppressed. I walk with a load of biases. I can make a judgment in a snap second. And it was me being able, and I really want everyone to listening to get this, it was me being able to embrace that about myself. Mm-hmm. It gave me access
Mhm.
not being oppressive,
Yes.
and catching myself
Mhm.
when the temptation was there. Right? It was me knowing that the potential is always there that has me not call someone out of their name,
Yes.
have me not make some nasty assumptions about someone, have me not categorize someone by how they look and all these different things. And my best friend says to me, I'm one of the most non-judgmental people she knows. And I didn't start that way.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have to know my judgment in order to
Mhm.
become non-judgment. I have to understand my own internalized racism in order for it not to rule my life.
And you have to know your internalized racism for you to tap into the level of compassion
Ooh,
to lead effectively and to lead earnestly and to lead change in the right direction.
oh, girl. Okay, okay. So let's talk about power right now, and I want to talk about power and leadership for a moment because I want to package this right. So one of the things, all the rage right now is cultural competency diversity training. And everybody's like, we need cultural competency diversity training. I'll tell you, I'm like, nah, man, that is so limited. Right. And my belief is that this is leadership training at its top-notch best.
Yeah.
The race, bias, privilege, marginalization, that conversation is essential for great leadership. Whether you are leading a family, whether you are leading a top-notch organization, whether you're leading a small business, or whether you're leading a country, let's just go there.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
The examination of race, culture, ethnicity, bias, privilege, all those things is essential for effective leadership. So I'm not going to sit it in the space of let's do race relations, cultural competency training, because too many people exclude themselves from that.
Definitely. Yes, that's absolutely right. That's right. Yeah,
Right.
that's right. Because we've given a face.
Absolutely.
We're
Right.
giving it a face.
And so part of the reasons I wanted to have these conversations starting in Black History Month was I really wanted to challenge us to let's not make it that conversation, cultural competency, race relations. Let's make it a powerful and essential leadership conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know we've both had the conversation of being mistreated, oppressed, marginalized, slammed by women.
Yeah.
Women who look like us.
Certainly.
By people we didn't expect. And I'm not saying it to point a finger at anybody, but this is the thing. Sometimes groups think that they're not part of the conversation because they're the oppressed group. Right? So oftentimes women say, well, that's not a conversation for me because I'm a woman and we are repressed. I've worked in women's services. Heck, women can oppress. Trust me on that.
Okay.
Right? I've also
sometimes worse than the ones you think.
Right?
Oppressed.
Absolutely. I've worked in organizations, whether it be marginalized because of race, Black community, whether it be because of religion, all those sorts of things. Oppression and power rules everywhere.
Yes.
And so for me, the concern is if we just have a conversation that is narrowed, we will not unpack.
Definitely. And what I appreciate about you're saying that you've had the discussions on history and the importance of history. Let me say that there was a time when racism had a face because the power structure was one way. But I I challenge everyone to understand and consider that racism, power, and privilege has evolved. Just as human beings have evolved, we've evolved, the society has evolved, so has racism, power, and privilege. And it just doesn't, it's not the same. It doesn't look, feel, taste, smell the same. It's not. And so these kinds of conversations are timely, particularly in an age where we're seeing, this melting of thought and this melting of different generations, different cultures, different ethnicities. This conversation has evolved, and we cannot look at racism, power, and privilege the same as our forefathers looked at.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We can't.
I think it's gotten more sophisticated.
Oh, without question.
Right. And I think that's why we sit in the space of confusion. I think it is because it's begotten more sophisticated, and it's fought in different ways, right? It's fought in boardrooms. It's fought in economics. It's fought in access. It's fought in all these different ways. And one of the things, when I worked in social services, one of the things that bothered me was that people were invited to countries but not given access. Mm-hmm. And I thought, like, wow, you say, come, the land of the free, the land of plenty, North America, and people came, but they encountered this slippery thing that they couldn't put their hand on because no one was calling them names, no one was beating them up, but people were denying access.
Yes.
And there isn't a group that has arrived in a country that hasn't been denied access in some way, shape, or form because of their difference, because of their lack of power, because of their newness.
Yes.
And so it is, you're absolutely right. It has, the face of it has changed.
Yes. And because we haven't come to that, we're still trying to fight this war.
Ooh, girl.
The same way we fought it 30, 40, 50, 100 years ago. And that's crazy. That's the crazy, is that we're still trying to fight something that looked the way it looked 40, 50 years ago, doesn't look the same. So now when you come against it, something doesn't feel right, but it's not the racism, power, and privilege that you've come to know and that you've come to believe exists.
It's different.
It's different.
One of the things I recently read, and I'm an avid reader, and when I get on a topic, I'm like rabbit hole. And it is one thing to legislate. Going back to Ken and Yetta's comment, it's one thing to legislate what we can say, right, which is what's happened. It's one thing to legislate what we can do. It's one thing to legislate how we can treat people. And that's kind of what we're dealing with. So we have legislation that says, we're equal, they have access, we have access, all these things. And we're talking all groups, women, men, whether it be gender, whether it be sexual orientation, we have all this legislation. Mm-hmm. But just because we change the way people can talk, just because we change the way people are allowed to behave, just because we change the way people can treat us in public, it doesn't mean we change their beliefs and their heart.
Absolutely.
And I think where we are challenged now as a planet, if you will, is that people are looking for legislation to change. Legislation will only change when we start doing our inner work and we demand change. And this is the thing about demanding change. Demanding change will rock status quo. Power and privilege will shift. Mm-hmm. Power and privilege will be all messed up. And mm-hmm. and I think if we keep looking at the world as there's not enough, right? Mm-hmm. That if this person has access, I am denied. When we start looking at the world from these skewed places, then the power dynamics are always at play. We are so in need of doing the work to understand power. And you're gonna come back and we're gonna do a call on positional power
Yes.
and like positional power, personal power, that sort of thing. Because what we're stuck on is that power is this thing that comes from economics, it comes from all these things, and that part of it does. But that's not the power that we all need. There's a power that lives inside us that comes from a place that I can only give it to me.
That is so key and so important. It's such an important conversation because if there is a shift in power, and we're seeing that, we're experiencing a shift. But if the power and privilege is associated with socioeconomic status, title, position, then all we're going to see is a shift of the oppression that we've seen, that we've experienced, or some of us have experienced. That's all you're going to see, because exactly what you said is that power is internal.
Right.
It is actually spiritual.
Right. And so Natasha, you're talking about, I dropped a post today, and I can't remember your new President Biden's quote, but he said that it was time for people to it was something about the power structure. And what I was challenged by, the quote I looked at it and I said, wow, that's interesting. Because when we sit in positional power, when we sit in power of title, I'm sorry, that is not power, that's force. And let's just call it what it is. It's force. When I pull rank, I'm not engaging you or inspiring you or enrolling you or influencing you to choose in. I am forcing you to choose in by the potential of loss of position, loss of economics, loss of the marginalized. That's positional power. And whether I wield it politely, whether I wield it with a bit of manipulation, as soon as I go to position and economic, it is force.
Yes.
Let's just be real.
Absolutely.
Power is when I am able to enroll you in a possibility where you also win.
Yes.
That's power.
Yes.
I am able to inspire you to take an action that not only is good for you, but is good for the greater good. That is true power.
Willingly,
right. Because power is influence, and influence is I choose in.
Absolutely.
With no reason other than I'm inspired by where you're going.
That's right.
And so why this is so key is that until we unpack it in that way, and we see this distinction between power and force, we're chasing our tail.
And are they not synonymous? Do we not associate power and force?
Right.
And call it a good thing. And we call it a good thing.
Yeah. So I think so when I teach leadership, I distinguish between power over power under and internal power. And I tell people none of them are inherently bad.
Right.
I want people to get this. None of them are inherently bad. Great leaders know when they need to use it. And great leaders use positional power and power over as a last resort, not as the thing they depend on and wield. That's old style leadership.
That's oppression.
It is, right? But it's old style leadership. That's what leaders did before. Mm-hmm. Transformational and empowered and inclusive leadership is based in the ability to influence and inspire and have people choose in.
Definitely.
Girl.
It's servant leadership, transformative leadership. It's the kind of leadership that we have to get to if we're to see the kind of diverse and inclusive and equitable workplaces or society as a whole that we wish to see. So,
Lord.
Yeah.
and we just scratched the surface.
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
I could continue this conversation for the next hour, and we would still just scratch the surface before before we go.
It's true.
Let's
It's
just
true.
see. I'm watching. We have some comments here. Oh my goodness. Woo, people have been commenting. Let me see what they've got here. There huge comments, you know, Taria saying, huge Natasha, doing your due diligence and on the interpretation and the context of words. Ken Decker saying it's not always, he was talking about parents and what they model. Privilege, we all have privilege and power. It's when it's abused that it's a problem. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly right.
Yeah, Yetta says power has many faces. Yetta, you put some exclamations, highlight that girl. Sarah's like, you got her thinking.
Yes.
She's like, what did I roll into? Ken says it's always an inside job before you change what happens on the outside. Amen. Don May can say it. It's I am responsible for freeing my mind. Thank you, she says. Let's see. Patricia saying, ladies, you are right. We need to change through the way we do things before we evolve, or the problem, before we resolve the problem and the face of it. Great comment.
Yeah.
And she's like, yes, so powerful.
Yeah. You know, one of the, and this isn't like a new concept, you know, if anyone watches Ijoema Fix My Life, you know, she talks about doing the work, and the work is us first. It's you. That work starts with you, because you can't fix a thing if you don't understand your role in that. And we all play a part in power and privilege and how that's exerted. We either give our power away, or we take it and we abuse it, because we've been taught to do that. So what's your role in that? What's your part in that? Which part have you taken on?
Ooh, she asked us, Natasha Hampton asked us such a great question. And I think that's where we're going to leave that. You know, Natasha, when I first started working, I had a supervisor by the name of Cherie Elder. And I remember when I first started working with her, I swore the woman did not like me, right? And I remember her telling me, I don't have to like you. I just need to respect you. And she said, and my job is to find the brilliance that lives within you. And then she looked at me and she said, so what do you know about history? I was like, not much. What do you know about urban studies? Nothing. What do you know about bias privilege? She asked me all these things. And then she looked at me and she said, and you're here to affect change. And she was like, little lady, you can't affect any change until you affect some change in yourself. So we're going to the library. And that was that. And that woman took me on an educational tour of Suzanne Hart and challenged me, because what she was saying to me is, until I truly know myself, and until I really knew what made me tick, what triggered me, what motivated me, what brought me anger and fear, until I understood the migration of communities and cultures and change, she goes, you can't go into someone's home and try to affect change.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, the big story that's happening right now is the young lady who put the Gorilla Glue in her hair, right? When I first saw that, my very first thought was, what was she thinking or feeling about her hair that she went to that extreme? Not that it was the fault of Gorilla Glue or anything like that. But my first thought was, what is she feeling? Like, what's going on with her? Right? What's going on with her? And I want to be very clear that I think certainly people of color and the trauma that we've experienced here, we just haven't healed from that trauma. And we keep trying to lead through trauma. How can you lead when you're broken, when you haven't healed, when you don't even understand your own trauma?
Right.
And you don't understand how the racism, power, and privilege has played into that. And now you're in an executive leadership position. And now how are you transferring power and privilege?
That's right. That's right. And I think it also goes to, you know, if this will be like where we'll kind of leave thought. If when you hear the words power, privilege, racism, you automatically get defensive, take a moment and examine why. Because chances are there's shame, blame, judgment of others, judgment of self. There's guilt. There's all sorts of things. There's a need to defend. And if that's your visceral reaction, then I'll say to you, there's work to be done, right? And not from work, because this is not a blaming game anymore. We've played the blaming game. We've played the finger pointing game. We played the blaming game. The game we all need to play is a self-reflection and personal healing game, and the game that gives us each individual power that is not based on the oppression and keeping down of someone else, but the power that's based on we can collaborate, we can grow, we can do all these things, because truly, we're going to talk about integration at one point, but truly, if we are to live together, it isn't about integration, nor is it about assimilation. It's about us coming to the table whole as our different selves.
Yes.
Right?
Whole as our different selves.
And not having to hide a piece of me, not having to hide a style of me, not having to hide a way of being to fit. Right? It is when we are willing to do the work, so we create the space for people to sit at the table, using your words from our last interview, whole and complete, fully able to share, fully able to contribute, and to know that their contribution will be valued.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Authenticity.
Girl, I knew I was going to have fun on this interview.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. I think I just read one of your the comments that we have to do a part 2. We absolutely do, because we just scratched the surface, and I so very much appreciate, you know, your comment about being whole, because I can guarantee I'm almost 50 years old, and I'm not sure who the whole Natasha Hampton is.
You know, I'm always, you know, just when I think I found her, there's a piece of me that I got to go do some work and complete on, right? And that's the work. And I think when I think I'm complete and whole, that's when I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think it's the constant of that work. Natasha, tell us a little bit about when do you have a projected date for the new book? Because, you know, we're going to help you launch that.
I don't have a projected date, but certainly looking at March, April for the release. And I'm super excited about it. This book is, again, it's Beauty and the Bias Beast. And I believe the awareness of a specific type of bias can really create the diverse, inclusive, and equitable workplaces that we all desire. And that starts really with human resources, because they are the attraction and retention center in an organization. And so we have to understand how our decisions, even with the talent that we attract, drives diversity in our workplaces. And that's really our subconscious biases are really driving those decisions. So that awareness, I'm hoping that this book really, you know, gets to the heart of that. So March, April, we're looking at.
And in the meantime, Natasha, she's the author of High Heel Leadership. Great read. So if someone wants to reach out to you and or purchase that book, where can they find you?
So you can find me at natashahampton.com. Natashahampton.com is my website. It's High Heel Leadership, the art of being a woman in power. You can also reach me if you're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram at High Heel Leadership. And if you're in the Clubhouse, connect with me at Natasha Hampton.
I love it. Natasha, thank you so much for just having the courage to speak.
Thank you, Suzanne. I really appreciate this very important dialogue. I wish that you would continue to have this dialogue because we need it, and we're headed in the right direction as long as we continue to have open, honest communication and a re-engineering of thought with our discussions on it. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I love you to pieces.
Thank you. Well, this is Suzanne Hart. I have been sitting down with the beautiful Natasha Hampton. This is Unstoppable Mindset. We will be back here next week. This is our series of inclusive leadership. Notice the title, Inclusive Leadership, right? And we are celebrating Black History Month, but we're going a deeper dive. We're having some really interesting conversations. I'm sitting down with some people I just absolutely adore. And next week we'll have a panel. One of them will be my dearest childhood friend. We have been friends for 40 some years. Yes, I just dated myself. And we're going to talk about, how that friendship has been sustained through all of this, the stuff that we're going through. So definitely next Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, please know you're brilliant. Do know you're special. And the world is waiting for your unique gift. Blessings, and I'll see you next week.